You make a mistake, you get walked into a room by your best friend, you don't walk out again.
When you have revenge in your heart, you might as well dig 2 graves, one for you, one for them.
We talk about trauma, and that's been my entire life, instead of actually being in the moment and having fun.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Millennials Choice Show. I am your host, Matthew Ablacan, and I am here with my brother, Danny Ablacan.
What's going on?
What's going on? We got a special episode for you guys today. Shout out to Skokie, Illinois, because this episode has to do with Chicago. We got some family there, and we got a great guest for you guys today. He was brought to us by one of our previous guests, Kurt Calabrese, and we are going to learn more about the Chicago outfit today. We're going to learn about Daniel Sheifert, his story, and we are going to hear it today from his son. Welcome to the show, Joey Seifert.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming on, and we just want to get right into it. We normally do this with all of our guests. Why don't you tell us, your story, your family story? Start from the beginning, and let's learn more about you guys.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So the story starts back it was probably the late 60s. My dad was in his mid-20s, running in the city like a little city rat. And he was always very, always looking for a way to make a buck. He was good with his hands. He was smart. And he started doing some handyman stuff, around. And he had a friend that introduced him to an outfit guy, which I don't think he knew at the time, but it was an outfit guy. And while he was doing work on his house, my dad was talking about all the stuff he wanted to do. He wanted to do this. He had this idea for business, that idea. And he brought up fiberglass. He was getting good with fiberglass, working with fiberglass. And back in those days, that's when fiberglass was about to just take off. It was about to get really big with Corvettes and jacuzzis and boats. And so it was a profitable thing to start with. And the guy said, "Hey, I have some friends. You seem like a go-getter. We'll give you some seed money to get started. Everybody will put in a certain amount of money, and you'll be able to get started, and we'll be your partners." Your
silent partners, right?
Your investing partners. Yeah.
Angel investors.
Exactly. Not the greatest angels, but yeah.
No, yeah.
Angel investors. So they got that started and got moving, and pretty quickly they started bringing in their other friends and associates. So you had, Irv Weiner, Felix Aldericio, Tony Spilatro, Joey Lombardo. And these guys, for people that don't know the outfit in Chicago, these guys aren't your little guys that are running errands or opening doors for guys. These are top guys. These are bosses. These are as other people call it, shot callers. They're people. They're serious people. And they did good for a while. They did good. They were making a lot of money. Things started to go south, as they usually do. And I think they were running a little bit more through the business than my dad really wanted to. He thought he was going to be able to take some money, give them some money, and then go his separate way, I think. And, it doesn't work that way.
Why did the Chicago mob want to kind of get involved with legitimate businesses, going all the way back to Al Capone? Can you kind of walk through that side of things first, just so that people understand why they had to go kind of get involved with legitimate business owners, just so people have a little perspective on that?
It's a short story. That's how they clean their money.
Yeah.
That they funnel money through legitimate businesses, and essentially they wash it and they take what they want.
Yeah. And even, everyone knows this too. It was one of those things where Al Capone was very flashy, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of these other guys, after he got, incarcerated, realized we got to smarten up. We got to be more low key. We got to, wash the money. Of course, we can't just going out looking flashy and not have a source of revenue, because the government's always looking, right? And so one of the ideas that they had was, let's actually go and invest in legitimate businesses like your father's and at the same time just launder the money through there, right? And have a hand in the business.
Yeah, the one thing about Chicago that I think is coming out more and more and more, but the Chicago guys were not the same as, like, let's say your New York guys. You know, your New York guys, you knew if that guy was in the mob or an outfit guy, you knew he was. Almost like he's wearing like a sign on his back. Where Chicago guys, you never knew. You could be standing, you know, the beef, and you could be standing next to a boss, and you have no idea because they don't. They didn't drive flashy cars. They didn't have the flashy anything. They wore normal clothes just like the rest of us. You know, they blended in.
I asked Kurt Calabrese that question, the difference between the Chicago outfit and the New York one, because we've had a lot of New York guys on our show.
Yeah.
And so that's the same answer we got from Kurt. But my follow-up question to that is, so a lot of people, they do what they do like for money because they want to have a good life. They want to enjoy themselves and all those things. So, I mean, if the Chicago outfit was more low key, why then do it if you're not really going to be able to openly enjoy the fruits of your labor, quote unquote? Like, why not just not go down that route? What was the, if the flash wasn't the motivation, the lifestyle wasn't, what was the motivation?
I mean, obviously to make money, but the flash wasn't there. But, you know, they had houses, they were able to go on trips. My dad was involved with some guys, and it was actually Tony Spilotro and some guys out in Deming, New Mexico. And I mean, they were buying an airplane, they were buying houses. So it wasn't that they weren't flashy in the way of, you know, nowadays you're driving a Rolls Royce and a Lamborghini. They weren't like that, but they had the money to go do nice things in their houses, buy other houses, vacation houses, boats, you know, things like that. I mean, these guys they bought an airplane. I mean, I don't know how much flashier does it get.
Pretty flashy.
It's pretty flashy.
You have your own airplane, you know?
Yeah.
That's dope.
Like, I'm Joey make sandwiches over here, but yeah, I got a Cessna and I got, you know, 5 vacation houses, and, you know, they're taking trips and stuff. And the other thing that I talked about with some other people is that, you know, these guys are making serious money. I mean, serious money, you know, and it's all getting kicked up to the top guy. But where's it going from there? That's always a question that we've always talked about, you know, in other circles and with other people. Like, all that money's coming in and coming in and coming in, but where's it going? That guy's not spending it, and he's the guy on top.
That's true.
You know?
What conclusion did you guys arrive at?
Right? I mean,
big business, right? Probably at that point, big business.
Huge business.
Yeah.
You know, look at Mike Franzese. He was doing what, $8 million a week or something?
Mm-hmm.
And all that money's getting kicked up. Where did it go?
Where did it go? Yeah.
I mean, $8 million a week, that's no small change.
No, that's big.
So, yeah, that's awesome.
Big. So yeah, I mean, so the business is now starting to go south. Your dad has these partners. He thought he could just kind of pay them back, get them off his back. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
What happens? Things
really went south when so they had a warehouse in Deming, New Mexico. It was called American Pail Company or something. They were supposed to be making like buckets and plastic shit, you know, stuff like that. And there was a partner out there, and the feds, IRS, had gotten to him and flipped him.
Okay.
And this is before anybody else knew. So he's under Tony Spilotro, my dad's under them, and they're still doing business as usual, you know, funneling money. They're funneling money from the casinos into their businesses, and they're washing it and running it through. And this guy ends up flipping. Well, by the time anybody finds out that he flipped, of course, they're looking at my dad. They approach my dad at that time and say, hey, listen, we already have somebody. We already know what's going on. And my dad is, I guess, in between that stage of going to Joe Lombardo and saying, hey, what are we going to do? And also at the other point saying, hey, listen, I'm not going to jail. You know, screw this.
Your dad wasn't necessarily directly doing the thing. Like he wasn't doing the things that the mob people would do in terms of like killing and stuff. He was just a business owner, the entrepreneur, running the business. And he was kind of just around those guys whenever they'd come by. I imagine they'd come by to the business pretty often.
He was full out funneling. I mean, he was funneling money. He knew where the money was coming from. They knew it was going through, but I think it was at that point it was getting more than he wanted. It was getting more attention than he really wanted.
Got it.
And he still in his head thought that, hey, you know, I mean, he's trying to run a fiberglass business and he's bidding on like the bullet train, and I think it was Japan. He's working on the first fairing for Harley, you know, the fiberglass fairing, the prototype. So he's trying to take it in a completely different direction. And then he's dealing with this other stuff. And I think for whatever reason, he thought, hey, listen, we're going to part ways now. And it just wasn't, they had their hooks way too deep in at that point. You know, and now you have IRS showing up and feds showing up and they're watching them and following everybody and, you know, taking pictures and talking to family members. And it got bigger than he knew how to handle, I think. Because our family was involved in the outfit before that. His father was involved. He was a realtor for the outfit. So it's not like this was something new, you know. It was already in the family. But I don't think he ever dealt with it to the point that his other brothers had dealt with it. You know, I think my dad was still maybe naive a little bit to how everything worked.
Maybe like, did he think maybe like he could just handle it himself, like he could take care of it kind of thing? And then it was maybe he realized he, you know, bit off more than he can chew in that sense.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, he had that definite, you know, 20-year-old big head mentality. And, you know, at that point too, you're already running and dealing with these outfit guys. So you get a separate sense of what, you know, you can do or get away with. These guys are untouchable at this point in time. This is during the 70s. This is like the heyday of the outfit when they were probably the strongest.
Okay.
So, you know, there was a certain part of that where police, judges, anybody, it was handled. It was done. It was taken care of, and you could do what you wanted to do. You know, so I think he still had that. He was young. He was still in his 20s. So, you know, you put that whole combination together, and yeah, I think in your head, yeah, I can do anything. I can take on the world.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not that way.
Yeah, that's true.
You know?
So what ended up happening I watched a documentary that you guys had. So the FBI approached your father, I think it was at like a diner, and they just kind of like put their business cards down and said, hey, like, we know what's going on. You're involved.
Yeah.
Right.
It was actually the IRS first.
Was it the IRS first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did they give him an offer, like a potential plea offer or something like that? And what ended up happening with that?
Yeah, flip and give us all the information. We basically already have you, or don't, and you're going to go down with these guys and go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he was stuck in a rock and a hard place, right? Either flipping or having to deal with the Chicago mob and the consequences there.
Yeah, and at that point, you know, I don't know. Anybody, I think you can propose that question to anybody, and I think everybody's going to have a different answer, but I don't know. Maybe you want to do a year or two in jail instead of getting killed. You know, I'm not sure. It's a question that everybody's going to ask, you know, and everybody's going to answer it different.
It's the most commonly commented on topic that's on our channel when we put some of these interviews up. It's everybody, just the YouTube audience. We love you and we hate you at the same time. It's just like you guys, everybody just, these effing rats and snitches and pigeons and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, if you were faced with a life sentence, because we had Greg Kading on the show, you know Greg Kading. So his episode's about to drop, and or at this time, for those of you watching, it has dropped already. And Greg said, he's like, most of the time they're gonna snitch. Like, we don't really have to do much convincing because we have a lot of the evidence already. So they're gonna snitch. He's like, but so he's saying that, but yet a lot of people comment and say, I would never do that. It's like, when you're faced with 15, 20 years or life sentence. You know, that are you gonna be loyal to maybe this cause that some of those people are now snitching on you? You know, that's Sammy the Bull's thing. That's John Elite's thing. That's what they've said, that someone was snitching on them. Someone was disloyal to them, and they chose to go that route. So, I mean, it's not too hard for maybe someone like your father who's doing more or less a crime that's not directly harming somebody in terms of murder or you know, other kinds of crimes. It's just laundering, and it might be an easier decision for him at that point to say, I'm going to put my family first, right?
Yeah.
I think with the YouTube, you know, I have my own YouTube show that we were doing too, and we have we talk to a lot of different people, and you have two people. I mean, you have some old timers that are just hardcore. They'll screw you, I'll do my 20 years. Screw you, I'll do my 40 years. And they've done it. I mean, we've talked to them, we've interviewed them. And, you know, there's guys that have spent more time in jail than not. And they're okay with that. You know, they say, listen, this is my thing. But I think what you have nowadays is you see more shows of, especially now with Rico and crap like that, you see more people that are in that position of like, yeah, you got me fair and square. Okay, what do I got to do to at least knock my sentence down? You know, and the guys, I mean, more than not, they give up whatever they give up.
For sure.
I mean, and it doesn't matter if it's outfit, you know, motorcycle club, street gang. It's
doesn't matter.
It's in every family, if you will.
Yeah,
it's crazy. So Joey, like, walk us through what happened next, you know, in terms of what decision your father made, and, you know, leading up to obviously the gruesome murder of what happened.
So
talk us through a little bit about that.
So things were building up. You know, my dad and Tony Spilotro never got along, ever. He did get along with certain people. He was really close with Felix Aldericio, who was a Wisconsin guy. Once he passed away, that's when his layer of protection really kind of was gone. You know, they were very close. My family was very close with Joey Lombardo. I'm named after him. He's technically my godfather. So he still had that protection. But things started to deteriorate. My dad was not giving clear signals on what he was going to do, if he was going to cooperate, if he was going to not cooperate. You know, Lombardo is reinforcing, hey, listen, go do your time. It's only going to be a couple of years. They have next to nothing on you. It'll only be a couple of years. That's all, you know, that's all we've heard for 40 plus years. It's only a couple of years. Don't worry. We'll take care of the kids, you know, your wife, the whole thing. And he would have, you know, there's no doubt Joe Lombardo would have done that. But for whatever reason, my dad didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do 2 years, let alone a day. So there was a lot of pushback. It was back and forth. You know, they would put pressure on him, you know, driving by the house or stuff like that. My dad would do stupid shit back to them, you know, kind of just poke the bear, I guess. There was a time that Joe Lombardo, Tony Spilotro, and I can't remember who the other guy was, were inside of the factory, the fiberglass factory. And my dad decides to put on a ski. It's middle of summer. Puts on a ski mask, runs inside, yells something, shoots his gun a couple times in the air, and runs back out the door. You know, and they're all standing there like, what the hell was that? And my dad goes outside, takes the ski mask, throws it in the bushes, literally walks back in, same clothes, walks back in the same thing. Did you see that guy? What the hell was that?
No way. That's crazy.
Yeah. So he was like, I think in his own way, trying to say, hey, listen, I'm going to mess back with you. You know,
yeah, like don't try to walk all over me.
Like,
kind
of. I'm also crazy.
Yeah.
Right. Let's try to figure this out.
Like know? I'm also willing to do what it takes.
Yeah. I mean, he was unhinged. We had guns all over the house.
Wow.
I mean, there were guns everywhere. You close the door, there's a shotgun behind the door. There's guns on coffee tables. There's gun purses. I mean, everywhere you could. There's a gun in the bathroom.
I mean, at this point, you were how old again? Were you? I think 4 years old, right?
I was only 4. I mean, I was only 4 years old. You know, my brother was older. He was 14-ish, 13, somewhere right in there.
Okay.
My sister about the same. So, they remember more and stuff like that. But there were guns everywhere. I mean, my mom will sit and tell that, they used to go to the gun range all the time.
Wow.
Oh,
He used to
How
teach her, this is how to shoot, this is what you do, blah, blah, blah. So there was never a time that he didn't have a gun.
wow. How was that growing up at that age? Do you remember a lot from those days?
I don't remember a ton of it. I get a lot of stories from my brother and from family of, oh, you don't remember this, or you don't remember you did that, or blah, blah, blah. And I really don't. My childhood, I don't remember anything but that day, then spottiness through life. Um, but yeah, I mean there were guns everywhere. He had a gun in the trunk that day. He had a gun on him that day. Um, so anyways, things, deteriorated to the point that they chose to do what they had to do. And it wasn't, I know you guys said you saw the documentary, if you saw the book. It wasn't like a little, hey, we're going to send two guys over here to clip this guy. I mean, this was like strategic. They had like 10, I don't know, at least 10 guys. They had people all along the route, scoping out and broke down cars, saying, hey, they just passed here. They just turned here. They're coming this way. There were three guys inside. There was a handful of guys outside. I mean, it was not a small thing,
It was planned out pretty. It was thought out and planned out.
Yeah. Yeah. It was militaristic. They had police radios. They had police that were involved. The chief of police of Bentonville was involved.
So walk us through that day. Like what happened? Because I can't remember right now. But for the warehouse, did they? Because I think they decided to just burn it up, right? Because I guess the IRS was all over them, and they were gonna.
Yeah. So that happened before. So that
Yeah.
happened. That happened much before. So my dad came up with this brilliant idea. Hey, we burn this warehouse down because fiberglass and the resin burns extremely hot and fast. So he says, hey, listen, brilliant idea. Let's just burn everything. Then there's nothing for them. There's no books.
Which makes sense. Yeah.
It does until you think of what happens because of when you burn it. So they decided to burn it. So he torches it. And at that point, the mistake that was made is it didn't burn completely. And what it did then is it turned it into a crime scene, which opened the door for everybody to walk inside and say,
Shoot.
let's pick through everything and find what we need.
wow.
Wow. So they didn't take out all the books and
No.
then torch
No,
it.
the idea was to torture them.
Yeah. Shoot.
They
You
figured
make,
out.
it, you make it look like an accident, right?
Exactly. It was an
Yeah.
accident. It was a chemical fire, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was before. After they burnt that whole thing down, my dad and Lombardo kind of separated. My dad and my mom went and started this other plastomatics company. That's where the murder took place at. So things were tense for a while, going back and forth, going back and forth. And then, so the morning, I'm supposed to go to this, it's like a old church is all I can remember. And it wasn't far from the business, but they had like a daycare in the basement. And I just didn't like that place. It smelled like, for whatever, green bean casserole and moldy wood or something. I just didn't like it as a kid. So I'm like, hey, I'm not feeling good. I don't want to go to school. So my mom's like, yeah, fine. Grab Hot Wheels, play with the cars. She's going to do some small stuff in the office. My dad's supposed to go to some meeting. To this day, I don't think we knew where he was going, but he was supposed to go to some meeting. So we load up the car. We're driving. They're doing whatever they're doing. I'm in the back seat playing with my cars. And we get to the factory. And my dad opens the door. And then he comes back because he's grabbing the vacuum out of the trunk. My mom and I go inside. He brings the toys in first, then goes back out. My mom starts making coffee. So my mom and I are inside in the office. She's making coffee. He goes back out to grab the vacuum. The three guys come in through the back. So they were already inside waiting.
Oh, okay. So it was an ambush, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. And then from there, everything just went haywire. My mom yelled, but my dad was already outside, so she couldn't, he didn't hear her. my mom knew at the time, but later it comes out that that was Joe Lombardo. Took us and said, "Hey, stay in the bathroom. You guys stay here." The other two guys go up front. Now, the other two guys is Tony Spilotro and Frank Schweiss, two notorious outfit killers. So the original idea is they were going to jump him, handcuff him, and they were going to take him somewhere else to torture him and to find out what he knew. My dad wasn't having that. So the two guys jump him. They're fighting with him. Frank Schweiss is trying to handcuff my dad. My dad's going for his gun. Tony Spilotro shoots him through the cheek. Luckily, it went through his cheek, right straight through. So he's blood all everywhere. They're fighting. My dad ends up getting away and running out the door. So those two chase. So for a little bit of time, Lombardo stays with us. They're chasing him through. This is like a bunch of little buildings and stuff, and they're chasing him through there. My dad's running in and out of businesses and stuff like that. And he ends up getting further down the street, and one guy shoots him with a shotgun. Or no, they shot him with a pistol first and caught him in the knee. So he's still trying to run. They shoot him in the other knee. He goes down. One guy comes up behind him. He's laying on the ground and shoots him in the head with a shotgun. So there's, a whole bunch of guys. They all take off and they end up getting into some sort of chase. A lot of police are involved and stuff. But the police end up getting called off of the chase.
Really? Why was that?
Well, we had a guy approach us. So obviously 40 years later, we get into the Family Secrets mob trial. And there was an officer that was there that approached us and said, "Hey, I was the guy that was talking to the police on the radio, telling them to back off." And he was told that he was to back off because a higher up, a superior, came through and said, "Tell that officer to stop that chase." So who knows? But that's the base. And then, that's where you find out, like, we ended up getting his wallet at some point later, and inside he had the chief of police's phone number in there. My dad did. And so it was, a lot of police were involved. There were sheriffs involved at the time and stuff like that. So the outfit was obviously covering their tracks. They had police radios, police scanners, and all that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What goes on in your mind? You're in that bathroom. You're obviously scared, but what's going on in your mind at that point?
Yeah, I mean, as a 4-year-old, I'm not processing anything. You're just scared. There's a huge bang. You hear the bang. You see blood on the wall, stuff like that. I don't think as a 4-year-old I'm processing anything at that time. I'm just staying close to my mom because that's the only thing I know. I got this other guy with a ski mask on, at that point. So I don't think at that point I was processing much.
And your brother, where was he at this point?
So my brother and my sister were both in school. So after everything happened, my mom ended up trying to call the police. This was obviously way before 911. So she's trying to call the police. The phone lines are busy. She ends up calling my aunt who lived close by. So she gets there, and she gets there actually before the police do, because a bunch of other businesses and people are calling, obviously. The police end up showing up. So they're going to escort. They want to take my mom to the police station. My mom's like, "No, you're not taking me to any police station. You're taking me to get my other kids." So there was an escort to pick up all the kids from school. So we go pick up my sister and my brother. My brother gets in the car, and he said, I started telling him, "Hey, there was a robbery. Dad got hurt, blah, blah, blah." And I don't know if it was the police or my mom. Somebody said, "Let's, not talk about this right now." So they end up dropping us off at my grandma's. My grandma lived in Melrose Park. So they end up dropping us off at my grandma's. And then my mom and my aunt go to the police station to make whatever statements and stuff like that that they had to do. Um, then for a period of time, it was just, you can hear my mom talking in the other room to my grandma and my aunt. Like, she knew she had to tell us something because obviously my sister and my brother were older. They saw a lot more than I did. So they ended up telling us that there was an accident and he died. They just said it was an accident and he died at that point in time. Which my brother said that doesn't make sense and blah blah blah. And so there was nothing for 40 years. For 40 years we were left to, I think my mom knew plenty. She obviously knew a lot more, but she wanted to shield us from that as much as possible. And as we got older, my brother and I, we didn't want to be shielded. We wanted to know what happened.
Which is natural, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Makes sense.
naturally, you want to know what happened and you want to know who was involved. And I think the bigger question that you always want to know is, why wasn't anything ever done about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why wasn't there any justice served, right?
Exactly. Why was nobody ever arrested or anything? We never got any information. Everything went black. That was it. There was just once in a while you would see stuff in newspapers.
I'm
That's
so
it.
surprised, like, especially with just the kind of murder it was. Like, it was point blank. Like, they were there and there had to be witnesses, there was people around.
Yeah.
It didn't really sound like it was like an execution necessarily, like a quick, easy execution. It was,
No, it was a mess.
yeah, your dad was fighting for his life, rightfully
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's insane how no one got arrested. That's crazy.
Yeah. And, 40, I don't know, it was roughly 40 years went by. And, we get the family, everybody's living in different places, gets the knock on the door that the feds are taking everything to trial. All of a sudden, 40 years later, they solved all these cases.
What happened? Like, what changed it?
So actually, that's where Kurt ties in, because it was his brother, Frank Calabrese Jr., that sent a letter while he was in jail with his dad and said, "Hey, I'll give you what you want. I want out. I don't want to be part of this anymore." And so he ended up wearing a wire on his dad. And then and I don't know, you'd have to ask Kurt the story, but his uncle ended up going and giving evidence on, it was 36 murders, but they only took, I think, 18 to family secrets.
Got it. And how did they end up tying that back to your father's murder?
So it was just, there was information on, basically information was given. I think the feds wanted uh, Joe Lombardo for the longest time and they couldn't get him. And I think they found a way to rope him into the RICO with these other guys. And because the evidence that we saw that they told us they had was literally the same evidence that they had from 1974. There was only a couple of things that were different. They did DNA on everybody because they found actually one of the work cars that was used that day with ski mask still in the trunk in Willow Springs that had hair and stuff in there. So they did DNA on everybody. I don't remember if that was conclusive or not, but I think they used it. So they convicted him. I mean, they were going to convict him no matter what.
On that point, with Joey Lombardo, share with us and talk to us a little bit about what you and your brother went through. I believe your brother's name is Nick, right?
Right.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about what you guys went through in terms of you guys looking to get some revenge for what he did to your father, and the journey that brought you guys through coming out right now. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you and your brother weren't speaking, I think, for like a long time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he took off, went to Florida, and we didn't talk for, man, I think it was like 20 years. It was a long time. Yeah, it was a long time. He was doing his thing. I was doing my thing. I don't think I really started to look into stuff seriously until I was in high school. Once I had a car, because then I was able to go places, and there was no internet and all that stuff. I grew up in probably the best time ever. No cell phones, internet, all that crap. So you go to the library, look up articles, old newspaper articles. I actually ended up going to the Bensenville police station at one point in time and asking them about, who I can talk to about any information. And well, what information on what? I'm like, on a murder that happened. They're like, what murder? Like, well, Danny Seifert was murdered, in 1974 and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, I'm sorry, we can't discuss ongoing cases, is what they told me. And I'm like, ongoing what? It's been, 30 plus years. What's ongoing about it? And it was just a back and forth. They weren't going to give me anything, and I flipped them off and left. I mean, what are you really going to get?
That's crazy. Did you tell them like I'm his son and I'm looking
Yeah.
into
Oh yeah,
his
I gave
murder?
him. I showed him identification, everything. Like, why are you asking? And I explained why. I'm like, oh, I was there. I was 4 years old, and I'd like to get some kind of answers. And they weren't having it. They were not having it. Um, so then from there, it was, for me, it was kind of going to places and talking to people and asking questions. And I don't think I was looking as hard as my brother was. I was obviously a lot younger when it happened. I was more meeting a lot of people, and I think I was more falling in with the people than trying to find anybody. My brother was more intent though on searching, and he when he was still living in Bensenville, he started working at a gun shop, and a retired Chicago cop actually owned the gun shop. So he knew, exactly who my brother was, and he knew his name. And so I think for my brother, it was a little different. He was getting a lot of information that none of us were going to get at that period of time from a retired cop. And he knew a lot. So I think my brother was on a little different path than I was for a period of time. But yeah, ultimately we both made the decision to do something, about going after. At that point in time, for me, it was always Joe Lombardo. I didn't really, I didn't really have all the facts because nobody wanted to really talk to me.
How'd you kind of have that feeling, thinking like it was him that was responsible for my dad's
I think just
murder?
things that were pieced together. There was a newspaper article from the next morning after the murder that said the feds were at Joe Lombardo's house. So it's like they even knew it was him, but they couldn't piece it together or prove anything at that point in time. So it was always kind of out there. The thing that's interesting about Joe Lombardo, though, or that I found interesting, is that Joe Lombardo technically was my dad's handler because he was the one that brought him in, and the whole thing. But what I found out years later, like many years later, after Family Secrets was done and the whole thing, was that Joe Lombardo was told by the higher ups that he was not supposed to go that day. He was not supposed to be involved in being at that day. And he went anyways.
You think it had to do with him maybe making sure that you and your mom would be okay, or if anybody like that was there on site and stuff like that? Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I had talked to, I mean, since Family Secrets has gone by and we did the documentary and the book, I've had an amazing amount of people that I've talked to. And I've talked to people that have been extremely close to Joe Lombardo at the time. And they all said the same thing. He said he went that day because the people that were chosen to do what they were going to do that day killed everybody. It wasn't, hey, there's a 4-year-old, we can't kill him. Hey, there's a woman, we can't kill her. They killed everybody. And Joe Lombardo specifically went to make sure my mom and I were okay. At that point, he really went just because my mom, because I wasn't even supposed to be there. They didn't even know I was going to be there.
Right. So what was it like now post this event? What was it like with those three persons that were in the warehouse that day? Joe, Tony, and I forget the third person's name.
Frank Schweiss.
Yes. Well, what was it like with those three now, seeing them? I assume they were at the funeral.
No.
Or no? Okay.
No, so that's the other thing that's, interesting when you're in this kind of situation is, when everything's good, you have all these uncles. I got Uncle Tony, Uncle Joe, Uncle Frank, Uncle Steve, Uncle John. I got uncles that I've never had before. And they're all good. All the, every time they see you, here, kid, and they're handing you cash. But as soon as something happens and goes bad, you don't have anybody. You never see him again. You don't talk to nobody.
Wow.
You never see him again. Nobody showed up at the wake. Nobody showed up at the funeral.
Was that a red flag for you as you guys got older? Was that maybe something like these guys might have had something to do with it, or?
Yeah, I think my brother put that together a lot faster. For me, it was kind of just a back and forth, of looking into stuff, getting frustrated. Fuck this, I'm not going to deal with it. And then not doing anything about it for a while. And then all of a sudden something will pop up in a newspaper and be like, I'd start looking more into it again. And, or once in a while I'd meet somebody and be like, oh, you know this, or you know that, and that's the funny thing about Chicago too, is everybody knows somebody. Everybody knows somebody. You say, oh, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I know, yeah, Seifert, that's your dad was Danny, right? Right? Oh, my uncle's, brother used to play cards with Joey Lombardo down here. And I mean, literally in Chicago, it's the smallest big town ever. Because everybody knew somebody. It didn't matter if you lived in Chicago, out of Chicago, anywhere. Everybody knows somebody.
And I wanted to ask you, so now that you spoke to people that knew Joe Lombardo at that time when your father got murdered, were you kind of relieved knowing that he went there that day to kind of look out for your mom in that case, and then as a result you, because you were there, were you kind of relieved that you and your brother didn't pull the trigger? Like, what's that like? Do you and your brother talk about that in regards to what was going on in your heads at that moment?
I mean, we did when we first started talking again. That was right as the trial was starting. We started talking again. And obviously neither one of us knew what the other was doing. But yeah, once we started talking, it was, we talked about what we were doing and why we didn't, do things and stuff like that. And he doesn't feel the same that I do. He still says, I wish I did. I wish I did. Yeah, and for me, I think I just had a different opinion that my focus for 30 years was on the wrong person. Not saying that he was an angel. I mean, God, he was no angel, but my focus was definitely in the wrong direction. I could have and should have been focused on other people instead of wasting time there.
Was that the differentiating factor between you and your brother? Like, you kind of realized maybe like, I'm not going to get anything out of this if I pull the trigger. And then for your brother, like, what stopped him in that case? Have you guys spoken about that? Like, why did he not make that decision to pull the trigger?
I think the only time we really brought it up or talked about it was while we were actually filming the documentary. And for me, it was completely I had two kids. I have two stepkids now, but I had two kids at that time. And, my son was just having some troubles and stuff. And I was just looking at him and I was like, I don't know how worth it is at this point. At that point, I was looking back at 30 years of screwing around and looking into people and talking to people and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, why would I waste that 1% chance that I do get caught and they're going to have to visit me for the rest of their life in jail? Like, that's not the way that I thought things should be. I mean, that's why I didn't do it.
Certain parts of the world, when a family member is murdered, there used to be what was called the Avenger of Blood, and they were allowed. I don't know if you heard of that, but they were allowed to then go and avenge the family member. So sometimes when you look at these cases and you see the amount of like anger and frustration that's in a parent or child or something, and they're willing to take that vengeance, it's like in some cultures it's the norm.
It's like expected,
It's expected. Yeah.
If that was okay here, you need a lot more cemeteries. There'd be a lot of dead people.
That would be the only Avengers we'd know about. Forget about this Marvel stuff. That's the only Avengers we'd hear about.
Yeah.
Sure.
But, if you think about that and you take that story, and if that was okay here, then I would have avenged. If I would have went and avenged it because the law said it was okay, I would have killed somebody that went there to save my life instead of make sure I was dead. So I think if I look back at everything now, I think that's the biggest thing that I take away, that I try to tell. I talk to so many people, public speaking and stuff about trauma and post-traumatic stress and stuff like that. And I think that's been my biggest regret my whole life, is that I've wasted 30 years of my life focused on this one point in time. And I've missed so many different things. I had another guy I talked to that we've done some shows together. He's actually an attorney, and we've done a lot of outfit related shows. And he's just had like the greatest, I would say normal upbringing, like just a good, wholesome upbringing. I always sit and I'm like, gosh, what was that like? Like, how great would that be? To be where you didn't have this one event that changed the whole trajectory of your life into, this is all I do now. We do documentaries and books, and we talk about trauma, and that's been my entire life. That's all that's been focused on, instead of, going on vacation and actually being in the moment and having fun.
I think the biggest thing to understand for our listeners as well is that you and let's say your mom and your brother and your sister were the real victims of the crime. And so you guys had to live with the repercussions of your father's actions, those other people involved, that whole thing that transpired. You've had to live with that all these years, right? So I think a lot of people
because that stuff doesn't go away. It never goes away.
Exactly.
Sure. Like, I'm sure even your mom, especially too, like she's probably very afraid after that time that they might come after her, right? And now she's alone with 3 kids, having to raise you guys up alone. So I can't even imagine what she went through.
We still all live the same. We still all live very cautiously, and we're careful who we talk to, and we're careful of what information we give out. It's just how we were raised. Like, we don't know any better. Like, when I met, I'm married right now. When I met my wife, I'd talk about stuff. Oh, you remember that person in the restaurant and this and that? And I would describe them, and she'd look at me like, what are you even talking about? And to me, it's not normal that I can go to a restaurant and I can remember what people ate and how people were dressed, and, who was doing this or who was doing that and who was sitting where. And that's like not normal to me, and I don't know if it's normal to other people, but to me, that's like not normal, that you can focus so much on everything going around you that you're missing everything that's going on in front of you, because you're always so guarded about what's going on around you.
Wow, that's interesting. So you kind of have like this heightened situational awareness, always just looking around, kind of head over your shoulders and behind your back, looking and just kind of wanting to know what's kind of going around.
Yeah, like I'm El Chapo or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I have nothing to worry about. Like, why am I worried about all this shit?
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy.
So at the very most, you go into, like, I go into a restaurant. It's like, I just want to make sure I know where the exits are in case there's a fire or something like that, and just look around, make sure there, everyone seems normal. But that's at the most, that's what happens.
Yeah, but we're like I mean, and that's how we were raised. And we weren't raised that way. Like, my mom wasn't like, you have to do this and you have to do that. It was just what we observed and we picked up and then we adapted to our life for the rest of our life. Like, even now I still do it. I'm still very cautious. Like, you have that like built-in radar, and certain people, once they come around, you're like, watch that person. You can just tell. And it's just weird radar.
I would say it's a pretty good skill to have, though, right? Because
Yeah.
you can probably see through a lot of bullshit, right?
Yeah. It's turned out to be a good skill. It's just, I'm not, it's not like, I'm an FBI agent or something like that. It's like, I don't need that skill. You know what I mean? It was just ingrained into me. It is a good skill to have, but it was just like ingrained into me, like not normal.
What do you want to leave our listeners with? Maybe one final thought, and then tell them how they can connect with you as well in the name of your show. We're going to post all the links in the description. But besides, you left a very good, like, first of all, great episode, we feel. And also the idea of like, just the focus was the wrong focus to have for the last 30 years. That was powerful. Anything else you'd like to leave them with?
Yeah, I think if you go through any type of trauma, that seek help. There's no shame in talking. Talk to your friend, talk to your brother. There's no shame in getting help and not letting it control your life. Don't waste your life. Life's short. We all see it. I'm all over. If anybody wants to reach out or anything, I'm all over Facebook. You'll find me, Joey Seifert. We have a book available that's on Amazon. You can order that. The documentary is on the Reels Network, and it's also on Tubi TV now for free. Yeah. But I think that's the biggest thing. Just don't waste your time in life. Life's short.
I think we all honestly need a little bit of that, because
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much distractions these days, especially like we were saying before, like with cell phones and things like that. It's so hard to live in the moment these days because everything is trying to grab your attention, right?
Right.
And just being able to be in the present. We always say be grateful for what we have. What we're blessed with. Things could be worse, right? Like look at how those guys were living their lives, right? In the Chicago mob, and there's no need to live like that. And if you are going through stuff, I definitely say reach out to somebody. And it's one of those things where always focus in on what's important and what matters the most.
I was just talking with one of my buddies, and we were like, I just had my first child, and he has kids as well, and he's like, dude, how silly do you feel when you think about some of the things you used to worry about? I'm like, I know. I'm like, now I don't care.
Whole different world now.
Whole different perspective, whole different world. And it's like, especially young guys, young ladies and guys, it's like sometimes we think we know it all, and we think we have everything, the world figured out. But until you really go through some like real life experience, you realize how little you actually know. And it's like, man, the kid, like I was showing these guys videos today with the kid, because he's at home with the mom today, and I'm like, look at him. I'm like, he just, no matter what you're going through in your day, you look at him, you're like, everything's fine. You know? And so, as you said, focusing on the right thing and on what matters, what's important.
Yeah, because they can pick up on all that. You're stressed out, you're worried, you're frazzled, you're whatever. They pick up that energy, and it feeds into them.
This was great.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. This was awesome, man.
We're going to do it again very soon.
Absolutely.
So to our watchers, our viewers, our listeners, guys, please smash that like button, as Danny likes to say. Subscribe to the channel, share with your family and friends. Joey, once again, thank you for coming on. And until next time, you guys, we're out.